This story is about a house, old and patient, hiding secrets in its shadows, and a woman who stumbled into its rhythm without knowing, without warning. It is about whispers that curl around walls, soft and deliberate, carrying meaning I could feel but not understand. It is about mirrors that do not merely reflect, but watch, and shadows that stretch too far, pressing against the edges of perception. It is about letters that appear, as if by intention, guiding, teaching, pulling me deeper into the house's awareness. Every step I take, every breath I draw, is observed, catalogued, woven into its careful, deliberate design. Listen carefully, because this isn't just another story. It is a slow descent into understanding, into attention, into the quiet, patient, and eternal presence of something that sees, waits, and never forgets. The gravel crunched under my tires as I turned onto the long, winding drive, the fog curling around the headlights in thick, ghostly coils, wrapping the trees like skeletal fingers that reached toward the sky. Even from a distance, the house looked ordinary, pale siding, a steep roof, small windows reflecting the overcast sky, the kind of place that might appear in a travel magazine. But as I drew closer, it felt wrong. The clearing it sat in seemed suspended in time, the air unnaturally still, heavy. Pressing against my skin like a weight I couldn't shake. I parked near the front porch and sat for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the darkened windows, wondering if the emptiness around me was truly emptiness at all. The gravel continued to crunch beneath my boots as I walked up the steps, and the sound seemed louder than it should have been, echoing back from the house as if mocking my presence. The door handle was cold to the touch, smooth in a way that felt deliberate. And when I turned it, the door swung open with a faint creak, like a breath exhaled after decades of silence. Inside, the house smelled faintly of old wood, damp earth, and something faintly sweet, like smoke from a fireplace that had burned out long ago. The hallway was narrow, lined with faded wallpaper, patterns curling across the walls as though they were watching me as I moved. Each step I took echoed through the rooms, swallowed by silence, or perhaps by the house itself, breathing around me. Waiting for me to notice, I set my bags down in the small bedroom at the end of the hall. The window overlooked the fog-shrouded clearing, and I could see the trees leaning slightly inward, their branches swaying though the air was still. I told myself I was imagining it, that my mind had been poisoned by too many late-night horror stories. I unpacked slowly, careful not to disturb the house too much, though every creak of the floorboards seemed amplified, each whisper of the wind against the siding. Carrying weight. I wandered the house, exploring room by room, noticing details I hadn't expected. A chair slightly out of place in the corner of the living room, a faint discoloration on the floor as if someone had knelt there for hours, dust motes suspended in shafts of light like tiny, floating ghosts. I tried to shrug it off, laughing softly, but the sound seemed swallowed immediately by the walls. By evening, the sky had darkened into a heavy gray that threatened rain. I set a few candles along the mantel in the living room, the flickering light casting dancing shadows across the walls, and I felt, for the first time, the unmistakable sense of being watched. I turned, expecting to see someone behind me, but the room was empty, still. The feeling persisted, a soft pressure at the back of my mind, like the house itself was aware, not just alive, but conscious, waiting, observing. Dinner was simple, reheated pasta from a container. But even this mundane act felt amplified in the quiet, the clink of egg, fork against the plate sounded like a bell tolling, and the faint scraping of a chair against the floor made me jump. I told myself it was nothing, that it was simply a house settling in its old bones. But every shadow seemed to stretch, twist, and linger too long. When I finally went to bed, the room felt smaller, the darkness heavier than it had any right to be. I lay under the covers, listening to the soft creaks of the house as it shifted inside. Then I felt it, a weight pressing gently against the mattress. Though no one was there, I froze, heart hammering, and listened. The air was still, yet it carried a subtle vibration, like a heartbeat echoing through the walls. I told myself it was imagination, told myself to breathe slowly, count each heartbeat, but the sensation remained, patient, persistent, and I realized something I didn't want to acknowledge. This house had been waiting for me. Sleep came slowly, in shallow, uneven bursts. Dreams were vivid. I wandered the hallways, doors opening where none should exist, photographs shifting on the walls, faces that watched me silently, and the fog outside pressing against the windows like a living thing. I woke in the night to faint whispers curling through the darkness, words I could not understand. Soft, deliberate, coaxing, and I pulled the covers over my head, listening as the house exhaled around me, knowing it was patient, and I was its guest, whether I wanted to be or not. Morning came with a dull gray light that made everything appear muted, yet even in the daylight, the house felt alive. The creak of the floorboards, the sway of the curtains, the faint scratches along the wooden walls, all felt deliberate, and I realized, with a chill running down my spine, that my presence had been noted, cataloged, and that the house had already begun to learn my habits, my fears, the rhythm of my breathing, as though it intended to know me completely. I packed my things into small piles, moved them from room to room, just to see if the house noticed. It did. Shadows shifted with my movements, dust stirred without a breeze, and somewhere in the distance, I could have sworn I heard the faint scrape of nails along wood. I left the bedroom and walked slowly through the hallway. The photographs in the frames seemed to watch me more intently, the eyes sharper, the faces almost alive. A chill prickled along my spine, and I realized, half in dread, half in awe, that this was not just a house. It was patient, aware, and it had been waiting for me. Long before I had ever set foot inside. I paused at the living room doorway and looked around, listening to the soft hum of silence that filled every corner. I could feel it there, unseen, observing, and I knew, deep in my bones, that tonight would be different. The house would not let me sleep as I had before. It was ready to teach me something, or show me something I could never unsee, and so I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, every creak beneath my feet magnified in the quiet, every shadow twisting just out of sight, and I lay down, aware that I was no longer alone, aware that the house was conscious, patient, eternal, and that it had chosen me for something I could not yet understand. Morning arrived muted, as though the sky itself were holding its breath. The gray light spilled unevenly across the worn wooden floors, falling in patches where the curtains didn't quite reach. And I noticed the faint pattern of dust on the hallway like footprints frozen in time. The air inside felt heavier than the night before, pressing softly against my chest as I took a cautious step toward the living room. Every creak of the floorboards sounded deliberate, like the house was adjusting to my presence, measuring my attention, my patience, my fear. I checked the doors, each handle cold, unyielding. Then I saw it, a small, almost imperceptible mark on the floor. Not a footprint exactly, more a faint scuff. Leading from the hallway to the corner near the fireplace. I bent closer, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Dust shifting, a scuff from an old chair, perhaps, but my chest tightened and the hair on my arms rose. By noon, I felt it again. Eyes. Not physical eyes, but the sensation of being observed, a warmth at the back of my head, a subtle pressure crawling along my spine. I told myself it was imagination, that the house, old as it was, had no consciousness. But the small disturbances, the scuff, the chair slightly shifted. The faint echo of a footstep where none could have been began to accumulate, threading a tension through the rooms, wrapping around me like a soft, persistent chain. The living room was the most unsettling. I tried to arrange the furniture, straighten the mantle, and the room seemed to resist. The chair I had moved slid imperceptibly back into its old corner, and a picture frame, which I was certain had been straight, tilted slightly toward me as though leaning in to watch. I attempted rationality. Maybe drafts, maybe vibrations from the gravel driveway outside, but the air felt thick, almost sticky, as though carrying the weight of intention. Night, the whispers returned, soft, sibilant, curling along the walls and into the corners of my ears. I could not understand the words, but the tone carried meaning, a coaxing, a patient insistence. I would lie in bed, heart hammering, trying to track the source, only to realize it was everywhere and nowhere, a presence that moved with me, aware of every breath. Sleep became a negotiation. I felt the house's patience pressing against me, the walls exhaling slowly, rhythmically, and I drifted on the edge of consciousness, never fully asleep, never fully awake. I began leaving small notes around the house. Reminders that I was alone, warnings for myself in the form of questions. Did you move the chair? Are you imagining this? By morning, some notes were gone, some rearranged, and one, placed carefully on the kitchen table, read, "No, you are not alone." My own heartbeat became a metronome against the house's pulse. The shadows shifted in accordance with my movements, lengthening or contracting with subtle precision. Even the sunlight felt deliberate, falling in streaks that emphasized corners where darkness lingered longer than it should. I wandered the house slowly, noting details I had missed before. A faint scratch along the hallway wall, the slight unevenness of a floorboard that made the wooden boards hum beneath my feet, a draft that seemed to carry a whisper of voices, distant, indistinct, almost inaudible, curling around the corners. Dinner was simple, reheated, eaten slowly, but even the clink of my fork against the plate sounded magnified, a bell tolling in the quiet of the house. I paused, listening. Nothing moved, yet I could not shake the impression of eyes pressing against me, the sensation of someone or something standing just beyond vision, patient, deliberate, unblinking. By midnight, I began to notice patterns in the noises. A chair would scrape at exactly 2:17 a.m. Floorboards would groan as though sighing in relief at 2:42 a.m., and faint scratching along the wooden walls seemed to follow my steps as I moved between rooms. I lay awake in bed, counting my breaths, feeling the rhythm of the house synchronize with my own heartbeat, and I realized it was deliberate. It was learning. I began to feel the house's presence even in moments of stillness, stretching into corners, lingering in doorways, pressing softly against my skin, a quiet insistence that I was being observed, catalogued, known. Dreams began to blur with reality. I would awaken in rooms I had not entered, see shadows leaning from corners that did not exist, and yet everything felt as solid, as real, as waking life. The whispers followed me into the waking hours, a faint sibilant hum at the edge of my hearing, curling around my thoughts, shaping my perceptions. By the end of the second night, I could no longer convince myself of solitude. The house had revealed itself, slowly, patiently, in small gestures, whispers, and shadows that lingered just beyond understanding. It was not hostile, not yet, but the sense of awareness, of deliberate attention, pressing quietly into the spaces around me, was undeniable. I fell asleep reluctantly, breathing shallow, counting, waiting for the moment when the house would choose to speak or act or reveal the first glimpse of what it wanted from me. I found the staircase by accident. A faded curtain in the far corner of the kitchen caught my attention, its edges frayed, discolored, hanging like a secret waiting to be discovered. Curiosity drew me forward, though a soft tremor ran through my hands. Behind the curtain, a narrow, steep staircase spiraled upward into darkness. The wood was aged, worn smooth in places where countless hands had touched it, and the air around it felt colder, heavier, as if the space itself had been sealed off for decades. I hesitated at the bottom step. A faint draft brushed my cheek, carrying the scent of old paper, dust, and something faintly metallic. The house was quiet, impossibly still, and yet I could feel the weight of unseen attention pressing against my back. Soft, patient, deliberate. I climbed slowly, every creak of the steps amplified in the silence, my fingers brushing the railing, noting the grooves and splinters. Halfway up, a soft shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't fear exactly. It was recognition, a subtle, insistent awareness that I had been expected. At the top, the attic stretched before me, shadowed and vast, the floorboards thick with dust, the air heavy with the scent of decay and old memories. Photographs lay scattered. Black and white faces staring up at me from warped frames, eyes that seemed almost alive, watching, waiting. A trunk with rusted hinges sat in one corner, locked tight, its surface scratched, worn, like it had been touched too often by hands no longer here. I moved carefully, each footstep stirring motes of dust into the dim shafts of light that fell from a single small window. The shadows in the corners seemed to twist slightly when I glanced away, only to return to stillness when I looked directly. Then I felt it, a subtle, almost imperceptible weight behind me. I spun, heart hammering, but there was nothing, empty space. Still, the sensation persisted, a soft pressure, patient and unblinking. I realized with a jolt that the house had been waiting for me. Here, that this space had been sealed for the express purpose of being discovered, its secrets meant for me and no one else. I knelt near the photographs, tracing a face with my fingertip. The image seemed to shift, eyes flicking toward me, and I caught my reflection in a cracked frame leaning against the wall. For a moment, it didn't match me. The eyes were older, hollow, and the expression, faintly knowing. A soft scuff echoed from somewhere deep in the attic, too deliberate to be the settling of old. I froze, listening. The dust swirled in a quiet vortex around me, and I realized I was no longer alone in the space, even though no one else was visible. The attic seemed to breathe. Boards creaked, the window rattled faintly, and somewhere behind the shadows, I could hear a faint whispering. It was indistinct, almost a hum, but the tone carried attention, deliberate, patient, almost intimate. I stepped backward toward the staircase, wanting to leave, but unable to shake the sense that I needed to stay, to understand, to see. The photographs seemed to beckon. The locked trunk whispered a promise I couldn't yet comprehend. Finally, I made my way down, each step deliberate, careful not to disturb more than I had to. The curtain fell back into place behind me, and the kitchen resumed its quiet stillness as if nothing had happened. But I knew it had. Something had shifted in the attic, in me, in the house.it had revealed a fragment of itself. And I had accepted the invitation, willingly or not. That night I lay awake, listening to the familiar creaks and subtle groans of the house. The whispers returned, curling around my ears, soft, coaxing, patient, and I realized the house was learning me as much as I was learning it. Sleep came reluctantly, shallow, fragmented, but I felt it there, lingering in the darkness, a quiet presence pressing against my back, patiently waiting, watching, knowing I had found its hidden staircase. The night felt different. The air inside the house was thicker, heavier, pressing against my skin in a way that made breathing feel deliberate, careful. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting the subtle creaks and groans of the old wooden beams. But beneath them, beneath the normal sounds of an old house, there was something else, a whisper, soft and deliberate, curling around the edges of my ears. It wasn't language, not in the way I knew, just fragments of sound, low, almost musical yet. There was meaning in the cadence, a rhythm I could feel pressing against my chest. I tried to dismiss it, rationalize it, telling myself the wind, the settling boards, the exhaustion of travel. But the whispers persisted, patient, coaxing. Intimate. I rolled over, my hands brushing against the sheets, listening for the source. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, folding around corners, brushing against walls, then settling behind me with a soft insistence. My heart hammered. Shallow and quick, and I realized I could not locate it, could not see it, could not even confirm if it belonged to the house or something else entirely. The air grew colder. I pulled the covers closer, feeling a draft brush my ankle. And the whispering grew louder, more deliberate. I could almost make out syllables, my name, soft, drawn out, then nothing but the faint echo of a sigh that seemed to vibrate in the floor beneath me. I tried to rise, to move, but the house seemed to resist, holding me in place with unseen pressure, its presence a slow, deliberate force pressing against my chest. Every sound I made, the shuffle of feet on the floorboards, the whisper of my own breath, was absorbed, mirrored, and returned as subtle vibrations I could feel along my skin. I remembered the photographs in the attic, the eyes that seemed alive, the faces that leaned forward in shadows, and I realized the whispers were not random. They were directed. The house was aware of me, aware of my thoughts, my fears, my breathing, and it spoke in a language older than words, a rhythm of sound and silence that I could not ignore. Hours passed. Or minutes. Time had no meaning here. I lay frozen, listening, counting my breaths, feeling the pulse of the house in sync with my own. Every creak, every soft scrape of wood, every shifting shadow became part of its pattern, and I felt myself slipping into its rhythm. I whispered back softly, almost instinctively, a single word, my name, hoping to anchor myself to reality, to prove I was still in control. The whispering paused briefly, then resumed, softer now, almost approving, curling around me like smoke, coaxing me deeper into awareness. I thought of leaving, of driving away, but the thought felt distant, absurd. The house had begun to teach me its rules, its language of sound and pause, its patient insistence that I notice, that I listen, that I learn. I rose slowly, feet bare against the cold wood floor, following the whispers, tracing their rhythm along the hallway, not knowing why I was moving or what I might find. The air shifted as I approached the living room, and I could feel shadows clinging to the corners, stretching along the walls, following my movements, folding into the shapes of things I could not see. I reached the living room and paused. A chair had shifted slightly since I last saw it, and the photograph on the mantel, the one with the pale, staring figure, seemed to lean subtly toward me. Eyes glinting faintly in the candlelight, the whispering ceased. For a heartbeat, then a single phrase curled into my mind. You are here. You are seen. You are expected. I froze, heart hammering, realizing the truth I had been avoiding. This was not random. This was intentional. The house had chosen to make itself known, and I had responded. I returned to my bedroom, laying back on the mattress, breathing shallow, careful, deliberate. The whispers resumed, softer now, almost tender, and I drifted towards sleep, my mind folding into the rhythm of the house, every shadow, every creak, every whisper pressing into my awareness, teaching me to listen, to notice, to understand, even if I did not yet know what it wanted. The following night brought a new sensation, heavier, more deliberate. I lay in bed, eyes open, listening to the house breathe around me. The whispers were still there, curling along the walls, but now there was something else, subtle, careful, almost polite. Like visitors entering without my permission, but with intention. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Shadows stretching too far, floorboards groaning in patterns that made no sense, faint taps against the window, soft thuds in the hallway. Then I noticed a faint smell, unfamiliar candle wax, old leather, and something metallic beneath it all. It was not unpleasant, yet it carried a weight I could not name, a reminder that I was no longer alone. I rose slowly. The blankets heavy against me. The bedroom door had always creaked before, but tonight it was still, almost refusing to move. I pressed my hand against it, the warmth of the wood oddly comforting, and stepped into the hall. Footsteps followed, soft, deliberate, matching mine. Exactly, though the floorboards behind me were empty. I froze, my heart thudding against my ribs, and listened. The sound continued, a quiet rhythm, a presence that mirrored my movements without revealing itself. I reached the living room, and my breath caught. The candles on the mantel flickered as if a breeze had passed, though the air was still. The photographs on the wall seemed altered. Faces I thought I had memorized now tilted, eyes glinting faintly, tracking me, watching, waiting. The whispers returned, weaving around the silence. Phrases I could almost recognize, my name, repeated softly, and then a single word I did not understand. It echoed in my mind. Come. I did not want to move, and yet my feet followed the call, drawn forward by some quiet insistence. The hallway seemed longer than before, doors appearing where I did not remember them, shadowed alcoves stretching farther than possible. I realized the visitors were not tangible, not entirely, but they were here, shaping the space, pressing against it. Their presence folded into the house like breathing into walls. I stumbled into the kitchen. The faint taps grew louder, then ceased. The room felt hollow, the shadows pooling in corners, yet there was a warmth, subtle, almost welcoming. As if the house itself was introducing them to me. I could sense them now, deliberate, patient, careful, their attention focused on me, and I shivered at the intimacy of it. I tried to speak, to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. The visitors were not corporeal. They had no faces, no forms, yet I felt them lean close, observing, judging, their presence stretching into every shadow, pressing against the floorboards, curling along the walls. I retreated to the staircase, careful, deliberate. The attic door was closed. I did not open it. The visitors had made their introduction, and I was aware, painfully aware, that this house was a threshold, and I had crossed it without knowing, back in the bedroom. The whispers settled into a rhythm. A pulse under the floorboards, a careful cadence in the walls, and the soft, almost tender pressure behind me, reminding me that I was being observed, catalogued, learned. Sleep came slowly, reluctantly. Dreams were vivid, populated by shadowed figures that moved with deliberate intention, mirroring my own thoughts, my own fears. I awoke in the early hours, sweat cold against my skin, the shadows pulling closer than before. The whispers curling around me with patient insistence. I realized, with a shiver that traveled from my scalp to my toes, that these visitors were not here to harm me. Not yet. They were here to watch, to wait, to teach me the rhythm of the house, to draw me deeper into its folds, into its quiet, patient awareness, and I had no choice but to follow. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling unevenly across the bedroom floor. I felt different, not just tired, but unsteady, as if the night had left a residue on my mind, a subtle haze that refused to lift. I dressed slowly, bare feet against the cold wood, and walked toward the hallway. Something felt altered in the air, a tension, a quiet insistence that I notice, that I pay attention. Then I saw it. The mirror in the hallway, tall and ornate, had been moved. I was certain it had hung against the wall in the living room the day before. Its surface was smudged with dust, but the reflection was too clear, too deliberate, and something in the glass didn't match me. I stepped closer, heart quickening. The reflection mirrored my movements, yes, but the eyes, the expression, the subtle tilt of the head, it was wrong, older, tired, knowing, and it smiled faintly, a curl of lips that I had not formed. I reached out to touch the glass. The air pressed against my hand, colder than the rest of the room. A shiver ran up my arm. The reflection didn't move with me, didn't flinch, didn't respond. It just watched. And in that watching, I felt the weight of the house, its patient, deliberate attention pressing into my chest, curled into the shadows that pooled around me. I tried to pull away, but my fingers lingered on the cool surface. And the whispering began again, soft, indistinct, curling around the walls and ceiling, repeating my name, almost beckoning me closer. The mirror seemed to pulse slightly, a subtle distortion, as if the glass itself were breathing. I stepped back, catching my own reflection briefly in the edge of another mirror. The other me was still, but the eyes, they flickered toward the hallway mirror, tracking the movement I hadn't made. Panic rose in my chest. I turned quickly, glancing at the doorways, the corners of the room, but the house was silent, still, patient. And no one was there, yet I could feel the attention everywhere. The floorboards beneath me hummed faintly, and I realized the mirrors were not passive. They were extensions of the house, windows into the awareness that had been pressing around me since the first night. I backed away slowly, counting my breaths, trying to anchor myself to logic, to reality, but the image in the hallway mirror remained. It didn't move when I moved, and yet it seemed to lean in closer when I blinked. The expression grew more pronounced, a curl of lips that held amusement, patience, understanding. Sleep that night was uneasy. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, half expecting the reflection to emerge from the hallway, to step across the floorboards, To press against my chest in the quiet. I pulled the blankets over my head, but the whispers curled beneath, around, and into my mind, persistent, coaxing, and patient. Dreams were fragmented and vivid. I moved through rooms I didn't know existed, shadowed figures following at a distance, mirrors in every hallway reflecting not me, but the house itself, watching, breathing, learning. I woke several times, heart hammering, feeling the subtle weight behind me. The quiet insistence that I was seen, cataloged, and understood. By dawn, the sunlight filtering in through the curtains felt like a warning. The hallway mirror gleamed faintly, and I realized the reflection would remain, patient, deliberate, waiting for the moment I would let my guard down. I could not ignore it. The mirror had become another presence in the house, one that observed, one that judged, one that reminded me that the walls, the floors, the shadows, and now the glass itself were all extensions of the awareness I could not escape. And I understood then that this house was patient. It would not rush. It would wait for me, teach me its rhythm, shape me with whispers, shadows, and reflections, and whether I wanted it or not, I was already part of its careful, deliberate design. The next morning, a soft drizzle tapped against the windows, a gentle rhythm that felt almost deliberate, coaxing me into awareness. I wandered into the living room, noticing something I hadn't before, a small stack of envelopes on the mantel, neatly aligned, almost ceremonious. I hadn't seen them yesterday. I hadn't placed them there, and yet they were unmistakably real, tangible, their edges worn, paper yellowed as if aged over decades. I picked up the top envelope carefully, running my fingers over the rough surface. N.O. handwriting I recognized. N.O. signature, just my name, written faintly in a script that felt intimate, familiar, as if someone had known me for a long time. Long before I had ever stepped into the house. I hesitated before opening it, a quiet dread settling over me. The air in the room seemed thicker, heavier, and the shadows shifted subtly along the walls, curling and stretching as though watching my every movement. Inside, a single sheet of paper, delicate and worn. The message was brief: do not fear the house. It sees you, learns you, but it does not harm. Listen, watch, follow. It waits patiently for you to understand. I swallowed hard. The words were unnerving, calm, and deliberate, their tone carrying the same patient insistence I had felt in the whispers, the shadows, the mirrors. I looked around the room, half expecting to see someone or something leaning from the corners. Nothing moved. The house was quiet, yet I could feel it pressing, alive, aware, breathing around me, as though it had placed the letters there specifically to remind me I was being observed. The second envelope contained a different message. The mirrors are eyes. The shadows are hands. The whispers are voices you will learn to understand. Do not resist. Do not run. You are part of the house now. I set it down, my hands trembling slightly. Every instinct screamed to leave, to flee from this creeping awareness. But something deeper, a quiet curiosity, a pull, kept me rooted in place, reading, listening, absorbing the rhythm of it all. The next envelope was thinner, almost fragile. Inside, a single line, barely legible. The hidden staircase knows you. It remembers your steps. Tonight, it will guide you. A shiver ran down my spine. I had seen the staircase. Yes, the narrow, spiraling steps leading to the attic. But the idea that it remembered me, that it had cataloged my presence and movements, was almost unbearable. Yet the words carried no threat, only patient observation, a reminder that the house and I were connected now, bound by rhythm, by movement, by attention. The stack was deeper than I realized. Each envelope contained instructions, observations, reflections, sometimes questions directed at me, sometimes statements I could not fully understand. All of them deliberate, patient, intimate. I spent the day reading slowly, carefully, absorbing each word, tracing the handwriting, feeling the subtle vibrations in the floorboards, the soft shifts in shadow, the whispers curling faintly at the edges of my perception. The house seemed pleased, patient, deliberate, as though it were shaping me, teaching me its language. One letter at a time. Vy. Nightfall, I had opened nearly half of the stack. The air in the house was thick, charged with presence. I could feel shadows leaning closer, mirrors reflecting movements I hadn't made, whispers curling into my mind with patient insistence. I realized that the letters were not warnings, nor were they instructions. They were a method of communication, a rhythm of attention and observation, a way for the house to teach me to see, to hear, to notice. I laid the remaining envelopes carefully on the mantel, feeling their weight, their deliberate presence. The whispers had become gentle, coaxing, guiding me, and I understood the letters were only the beginning. The house had chosen to make me aware, to bring me deeper into its folds, and I had no choice but to follow. Sleep came cautiously that night, eyes heavy, body tense, but the letters, the shadows, the whispers, all wove a rhythm around me, and I drifted carefully into dreams that mirrored reality, the house waiting patiently for my next step. That night, the house was quieter than usual, but the silence was deliberate, suffocating, full of expectation. I lay in bed, listening to the faint hum of the heating pipes, the occasional creak of the floorboards, but beneath it all, I sensed something waiting, patient, deliberate. Then I heard it, a voice, soft, almost indistinct, curling through the walls. At first, I thought I imagined it, the lingering echo of the whispers from previous nights, but it spoke again, clearer this time, deliberate, coaxing, intimate. Listen. My heart stuttered. I pressed my ear against the wall. The voice continued, rhythmic, patient, low. You are here. I see you. You must follow. You must learn. I rose slowly, bare feet pressing against the cold wood floor. The bedroom door was silent as I opened it, and the hallway stretched out before me, familiar yet subtly altered, as if the house itself had rearranged its geometry while I slept. I moved cautiously toward the sound, each step deliberate, careful, absorbing the subtle vibrations beneath my feet. The voice led me, curling around the corners, through shadows that stretched and twisted in ways that felt impossible. I reached the living room, the candles flickering faintly, casting long shadows along the walls. The mirrors reflected my movement, but the reflection did not fully align with my own. The voice whispered again, closer now, behind the wall, inside the very structure of the house. Do not fear. Watch. Learn. Follow. I pressed my hand against the wall. The wood was cold, almost damp, and I could feel faint vibrations beneath my palm, like a heartbeat echoing through the structure. I traced along the surface, listening, feeling the rhythm of the voice pulsing beneath, and realized it was guiding me somewhere. I followed, moving from room to room, the shadows stretching, folding, curling around me, mirrors reflecting angles I had not seen before, the air thick with anticipation. The house was alive in a way I had never imagined, not malevolent, not cruel, but deliberate, aware, patient. The voice led me toward the kitchen. A chair had shifted slightly, a photograph tilted on the wall, and I felt the subtle weight of attention pressing behind me. Like unseen hands brushing against my spine. I stopped, pressed my ear against the wall again, and the voice spoke, urgent but calm. Open the door. It is time. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed to resist, to leave. But the house and the voice had become inseparable, woven into the rhythm of my perception. I reached for the door, hand trembling, and slowly turned the handle. Behind the door was a small, hidden passage I had never noticed before, narrow and steep, descending into shadows that swallowed the faint light from the hallway. The air was colder here, carrying a faint metallic scent mixed with old wood and dust. The voice whispered again, guiding me down the steps, soft, patient, deliberate, a rhythm I could feel in my chest, as if the house itself was breathing through me. I descended slowly, each step echoing faintly, floorboards groaning in response to my movement. The walls pressed close, shadows pooling in the corners, and I realized the house was observing me, learning the rhythm of my descent, my breathing, my hesitation. At the bottom of the passage, the air opened slightly, and I saw a small room, dimly lit by a single shaft of light from above. The voice spoke one final time, clear, deliberate, curling around my mind, guiding my thoughts. This is where you begin to understand. Watch, listen, and remember. The house will teach you. I stood there, heart hammering, realizing the weight of the night. The letters, the whispers, and the hidden staircase had all led to this moment. The house was patient, deliberate, aware, and I had no choice but to follow. The hidden room felt older than the rest of the house, its walls lined with faded wallpaper curling at the edges, and a faint smell of smoke and dust lingering in the corners. The air was still, heavy, pressing softly against my skin, and the shadows pooled like dark water in every nook. I stepped further inside, the wooden floorboards groaning beneath my weight, and noticed the objects scattered across the small room. Books, leather-bound, worn with age, their pages yellowed and curling, photographs. Faces staring up at me with eyes I couldn't place, some familiar, some unknown, yet all alive with silent attention. I in the corner, a small desk held another envelope. I knew before opening it that it would carry a message, but I hesitated. A tight knot forming in my stomach. Finally, I unfolded the paper, and the words on the page made my breath catch. The house is alive. Not in anger, not in cruelty, but in awareness. It sees you, learns you, and waits patiently for understanding. I realized then that everything I had experienced, the whispers, the shadows, the mirrors, the letters, had been a gradual unveiling, a careful, deliberate introduction. The house had been teaching me its rhythm, its language of attention, its subtle insistence that I notice, that I listen, that I understand. The voice returned, soft, coaxing, curling through the walls. You are part of it now. You belong to its memory, its awareness. Do not fear. Do not resist. I could feel it then. The full weight of the house's presence. The way the shadows leaned closer, the mirrors reflecting more than my own movements, and the air vibrating with patient insistence. I understood that I was no longer an intruder, no longer a visitor, but a participant in its quiet, deliberate design. A photograph on the wall caught my attention. A woman, seated in the very room I now stood, eyes wide, expression calm, but knowing. It took a moment before I recognized her. The eyes mirrored mine, the subtle curl of lips, the tilt of the head, as if the house had been preparing me, showing me what I would become. The realization sent a shiver through me. The house was not malevolent, but it was patient, deliberate, and eternal. It had watched, learned, and now it was teaching me. The letters, the whispers, the hidden staircase, the voice behind the wall, all threads weaving me into its awareness. I stepped closer to the desk, touching the worn surface, and felt the vibrations of the house beneath my fingers, the rhythm, the heartbeat, the deliberate pulse that had guided me here. I understood now that my fear had been the wrong lens, that the house's attention was not punishment, but instruction, a patient guidance into understanding its quiet, eternal presence. The shadows shifted, curling along the walls, and I felt them brush against my skin softly, intimately, like hands guiding, teaching, welcoming. The mirrors reflected my image now, and for the first time, I saw the calm recognition in my own eyes, the awareness that I was part of something larger, something deliberate, patient, and eternal. The voice spoke one final time, soft but unmistakable. You are here. You are seen. You are remembered. Learn, listen, and remain. The house is patient, and so are you. I sank slowly to the floor, breathing deliberate, slow, rhythmic. The weight of understanding pressed gently against me, and I realized that my life, my perception, my awareness had been forever altered. The house had revealed itself completely, not with violence, not with threat, but with quiet, patient insistence. And in that revelation, I found a calm, eerie certainty, the understanding that I was no longer alone, and that the house, patient and deliberate, would remain with me always. The nights have changed. I no longer lie awake in fear, nor do I resist the whispers, the shadows, the rhythm of the house. I move carefully, deliberately, aware of every creak, every vibration, every subtle shift in the air around me. The house watches, and I watch with it. The mirrors no longer startle me. I have learned their language. They do not reflect only my image. They reflect attention, presence, memory, and in their quiet depth, I see the echoes of those who came before me and those who will come after. The letters have stopped appearing. Perhaps the house considers my lessons complete, or perhaps it simply waits for a new rhythm to unfold. I know now that its patience is infinite, its awareness deliberate, and its presence eternal. It does not act in haste. It does not need to. Sometimes I hear the whispers more clearly, not threats, not commands, but conversations soft, intricate, weaving around me, echoes of attention I have grown to recognize. They teach me still, though in subtler ways, guiding me to notice small things I might have overlooked, shadows curling differently, a floorboard groaning faintly, a mirror reflecting something just out of sight. I have come to understand the hidden staircase, the room behind the wall, the attic, the photographs, the shadows that press softly against my awareness. Each was a step in the house's patient guidance, a way to prepare me for the understanding I now carry. I do not move hastily. I do not sleep carelessly. The house has taught me its rhythm, and I follow willingly, deliberately. Night, I sometimes sense visitors, subtle presences, watching, learning, folding into the house as I have. I do not fear them. The house has shown me that awareness is not malevolent. That observation is not cruelty, and that patience is the only true power here. I have become part of its eternal vigilance, and in that, I am both observer and observed. I look into the mirrors and see more than myself. I see fragments of the house, reflections of its long memory, the the faint echo of footsteps that have passed this way before me, and the patient rhythm of its presence, alive, deliberate, unyielding. I have learned to move with it, to breathe with it, to exist within its folds without fear. The whispers continue, subtle now, softly curling around the edges of my mind, reminding me that observation is ongoing, that presence is deliberate, and patience is eternal. I sometimes speak to them, quietly, softly, a single word or phrase, and the house responds in kind, its awareness folding around me like a warm shadow. I have come to understand something fundamental. The house does not trap. It does not confine. It teaches, observes, and remembers, and I have chosen to stay, to move deliberately through its rooms, to listen to its whispers, to observe its patient rhythms. I sleep now in a measured way, aware of every sound, every subtle vibration, every shadow that curls along the walls. Dreams are not frightening, but vivid, populated with echoes of attention and observation, mirrors reflecting not only my image, but the essence of the house itself, patient, eternal, deliberate. Sometimes, late at night, I stand in the hallway, bare feet on cold wood, and listen. The whispers, the shadows, the subtle shifts of the house around me, they remind me that I am seen, that I am known, that I am part of its eternal awareness. And I smile softly, understanding, because I have learned the rhythm, the slow, deliberate, patient heartbeat of the house, and I will remain within its folds, forever watched, forever observing, forever a part of its eternal vigilance.